The dust hung low over the rodeo yard as the heavy trailer door creaked open. A towering bull stepped cautiously onto the metal ramp, his hooves clanking against the steel like distant thunder. The men near the fence grew quiet. Among them stood Elwood Granger, his hand pressed to his chin, eyes locked on the animal. He looked like any other cowboy in a weather-plaid shirt and old boots, but inside, something was breaking. That bull, named Rust, wasn't just livestock. He was family. And today, Elwood had come to see him one last time. Rust had been sold 3 days earlier to Cash Merritt, a rancher with money and muscle from Amarillo. The deal was final, the handshake done, but Elwood couldn't stay away. Not after raising Rust from a calf, not after talking to him in the quiet mornings when no one else was around. Selling him was supposed to save what little remained of the Granger land after his late wife's medical debts drained everything, but no amount of paperwork could settle the ache in his chest. As Rust stepped onto the dirt, his movements slowed. He sniffed the air, ears twitching like he was remembering something. Then his head turned, and his eyes found Elwood through the wooden fence. For a moment, the past flooded back. The fields, the storms, the sound of boots walking toward the barn. Elwood didn't speak. He just gave a soft 3-note whistle, the same whistle he'd used for years. A sound Rust hadn't heard since the day he was loaded into that trailer. Rust froze. Then, like pulled by something invisible, he walked, not toward Cash, not toward the penhandlers shouting his name, but straight toward Elwood. Every cowboy nearby stopped and stared. The bull stopped at the fence, lowered his massive head, and then did something no one expected. He lay down, calm, still, like an old dog waiting for his master's command. Cash Merritt pushed his way through the gate, cussing and waving contracts. "That bull's mine, Granger. Don't you dare touch him." But Elwood didn't move, didn't flinch. He stared down at Rust, his eyes glassy. He hadn't felt this kind of pull since the day Dovey passed. "I didn't come here to cause trouble," Elwood murmured, reaching for the latch. "But maybe he's not done with me yet." He swung the gate open. Rust stood, and the two walked out, side by side, leaving behind more than just dust. The sound of Rust's hooves echoing on the packed dirt was steady and sure. Elwood Granger walked beside him, each step heavier than the last. The arena behind them buzzed with disbelief, but he didn't look back. Rust hadn't hesitated, and neither did he. The years had taken Elwood's strength, his land, and his wife. But as the bull moved quietly at his side, it felt like he'd recovered something he didn't know he'd lost. That kind of loyalty wasn't taught. It was born, and now it was back. They reached the far gate when Thatcher Rowe, one of the event handlers, came jogging up with his clipboard shaking in hand. "Elwood, hold up," he called out, barely catching his breath. "You can't just take him. Merritt's furious. He's already calling a deputy. I've known you a long time, but I can't look the other way on this." Elwood didn't stop walking. "He came to me, Thatcher," he said calmly. "That bull doesn't belong in feedlots. He remembers what home is." Behind them, Cash Merritt was pacing furiously, phone pressed to his ear. "Yeah, Deputy Zeke Crowley. Get down here now. That old fool just stole my bull in broad daylight." Elwood knew it wouldn't be long before trouble rolled in. Zeke wasn't the understanding type. Still, something about the moment felt too big to back away from. Rust didn't lay down for anyone. He didn't follow orders. But he had followed him down by the time Elwood reached the old red truck he'd parked behind the stockyard. He could hear the sirens in the distance. He stopped, turned to Rust, and laid a hand on the animal's side. "You always had better timing than me," he whispered. The bull snorted softly, as if in agreement. Inside the cab, the worn photo of Dovey still hung from the dash. Her smile, faint and faded, watched him now like it always did. "You'd think I lost my mind, wouldn't you, Duff?" he said quietly. The patrol car pulled up fast, dust swirling around its tires. Deputy Zeke Crowley stepped out slow, hand on his belt buckle, eyes already locked on Elwood. "Now, what in God's name are you doing, Granger?" he asked, his voice low and stern. "You planning to take that bull across county lines? Because if you are, I've got to stop you." Elwood didn't answer right away. He was looking past Zeke now, toward a little girl holding on to the arena gate. Rena Lou Holler. Zeke's niece had tears in her eyes. She'd watched the whole thing. "Uncle Zeke," she said softly, "that bull don't want to go with Mr. Merritt. He chose Mr. Granger. You saw it." Zeke's jaw clenched, and for a second, his grip on the law wavered. Deputy Zeke Crowley removed his hat and wiped the sweat from his brow, the dust still swirling around his boots. He looked at Elwood Granger, then at Rust, the bull standing calm and defiant like a statue carved from muscle and memory. Zeke wasn't a man easily shaken, but something about the animal's stillness, his deliberate choice, made this different from a simple case of stolen livestock. It wasn't just property. It was loyalty on four legs. And Zeke had seen too much in his years to ignore that kind of bond. "Elwood," Zeke finally said, his voice low, "you're putting me in a tight spot here. You know the law. That bull's been sold, papers signed, money moved. You walk out with him like that, it's theft." Elwood didn't flinch. "He walked out with me," he replied. "That bull knows where he belongs, even if the law doesn't." The two men stared each other down, neither willing to break first. Behind them, Merritt was still shouting over his phone, threatening lawsuits and making demands. Just then, the passenger door of Zeke's patrol car creaked open. Nola Kincaid, a local reporter who'd hitched a ride for a story on the auction, stepped out with her camera slung over her shoulder. She'd seen the whole thing unfold and sensed the story was bigger than she expected. "Mind if I ask a question, Deputy?" she said, flipping open her notepad. Zeke's eyes narrowed. "You're already writing it in your head, Nola. Might as well ask." She pointed toward Rust. That bull sat down at the feet of the man who raised him, in front of 50 witnesses. How exactly do you enforce ownership when the animal makes its own choice? The question landed heavy. Zeke turned to Rena Lou, who was still near the fence, arms wrapped around a slat of wood like it was the only thing holding her up. "Animals remember, Uncle Zeke," she said, eyes glassy. "Grandma Annie used to say animals know the truth better than people do." That name, Annie, pulled something tight in Zeke's chest. He remembered her sayings, her calm way of seeing right through situations. The woman was gone now, but her words still clung to his bones. Elwood stood still, hands weathered and cracked, resting gently on Rust's thick neck. "I'm not asking for trouble," he said. "But if you think that bull belongs to someone else, try and move him yourself." Zeke looked at Rust. How still he was, how rooted he seemed beside Elwood. It wasn't just disobedience. It was a declaration. And sometimes, the law had to reckon with something older than paper. Zeke Crowley stood in the middle of that dirt lot, badge on his chest, and conflict in his eyes. The law was clear, but what he just witnessed didn't fit neatly into statutes and property codes. Rust hadn't been coerced, hadn't been led, he'd chosen. And even if Zeke wanted to pretend otherwise, that fact stuck in his throat, like a dry stone. Nearby, Cash Merritt was still ranting, red-faced, waving folded documents like weapons. "Deputy, you gonna do your job or what? I've got contracts right here." Zeke held out a hand. "I know the deal, Cash. I'll handle it." But inside, he wasn't sure what that even meant. He walked over to Elwood slowly, eyeing the old man's truck, the bull still standing loyally beside him like a weathered statue of stubbornness. "You planning to drive off with him?" Zeke asked quietly. Elwood sighed. "Don't know what I'm planning, Zeke. I just know I ain't leaving him behind. Not after what he showed me today." Back at the arena fence, Dovey Carlin, one of the auction's longtime volunteers, leaned close to Vera Lynn Tolliver, her friend of 30 years. "You see that?" Dovey whispered. "That bull laid down like he was praying." Vera nodded, her voice cracking. It's like he remembered who he belonged to. Word was already spreading through the crowd. People were filming, posting, whispering. Something about the moment was catching fire, not just locally, but in the kind of way that reached hearts before headlines. Zeke felt it too, the pull of something deeper than legality. Still, he had a badge. Elwood. "If you take him, I'll have to file a report. Marital press charges, you know that." Elwood looked him in the eye, steady as ever. "Do what you need to do, Zeke, but I've got nothing left to lose. That bull is the only thing in this world that still looks at me like I matter." The words hit hard, heavier than any law book Zeke had ever read. Behind them, Nola Kincaid started snapping photos, not of the bull, not of Merritt, but of Elwood, standing with cracked hands, sunburned skin, and a kind of quiet dignity that couldn't be faked. She saw the story forming like smoke on the horizon. This wasn't about cattle. It was about memory, about connection, about what's left behind when everything else is gone. And as Elwood reached for Rust's halter and gave him a gentle pat, Zeke didn't stop him. Not yet. Because deep down he knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Elwood Granger pulled into his driveway just as the last light of day faded behind the hills. The old farmhouse stood quiet, windows dark, porch sagging a little more than he remembered. Russ stepped off the trailer with slow, steady grace, as if he'd never left. Elwood led him to the pasture behind the barn, the same spot where he'd taught the bull to trust a rope and not fear a hand. The wind had picked up, and in the distance, thunder rolled. A storm was coming, and it wasn't just the weather. Inside the house, the air was stale. Dust danced in the last golden streaks of sunlight. Elwood set down his hat, moved with aching joints toward the kitchen, and turned on the radio. Static, then a clear voice. Breaking local news. Dramatic scene at the Jackson County Livestock auction today as a prize bull defied handlers and returned to his former owner. He turned the dial off. The silence felt safer. 2 counties away. Duke Malvern, a lawyer hired by Cashmerit, reviewed a folder full of signatures and witness statements. "He stole a registered animal in front of 50 people, Duke said. Into the phone. "I don't care if the bull followed him home like a dog. It's theft." Cash was livid on the other end of the call. "I want him in cuffs by the end of the week. You hear me?" Duke nodded slowly. "We'll get him. And when we do, we'll make an example out of him." The next morning, Elwood walked the pasture fence, checking weak spots, just like he used to. Rust followed him closely, brushing up against him every so often, like he was making sure the old man was still real. Elwood chuckled. "You came back a little heavier than I remember," he muttered. "But we'll figure it out." He paused near the edge of the field where Dovey was buried under the old oak tree. "He came back, Dove," he whispered. "You always said he would if he could." Across town, Raina Lou Haller sat on the front steps of her house, clutching her sketch pad. She'd drawn a picture of Rust laying down at Elwood's feet, just like she saw it. "Uncle Zeke," she asked softly, "is it wrong to want the law to be kind sometimes?" Zeke didn't answer. He was watching the road, knowing subpoenas and legal threats would arrive soon. And when they did, kindness wouldn't be enough. Back at the farmhouse, clouds darkened above. Elwood stood with Rust beneath the oak tree. As wind moved through the grass, he knew peace like this wouldn't last. But for now, he let it. Because storms, legal or otherwise, always give you one last moment of stillness before they break. Elwood found the envelope just after sunrise, tucked under a rusted horseshoe by the front door. The paper was stiff, cream-colored, the kind used by lawyers who charge by the hour. He didn't need to open it to know what it meant. Still, he slid a finger beneath the flap and unfolded the document. At the top, in bold letters, it read, "Notice of legal action, unlawful possession of livestock." His name was spelled right. So was Rust's registration number. No way around it. Merritt was making good on his threats. He stood there for a long moment, letter in hand, the screen door creaking behind him in the wind. Rust stood a few yards away, grazing like nothing had changed. But everything had. Elwood knew how these things worked. He'd be ordered to return the bull, possibly face a fine, maybe worse. And the court wouldn't care about loyalty or whistles or how the animal had chosen him. They'd only see ownership on paper, not the years that lived in the silence between a man and the beast he raised. Later that day, Nola Kincaid showed up unannounced, her camera bag slung over one shoulder and a notebook in the other. "I came to get your side of the story," she said as Elwood opened the door. "But truth is, I don't think it's a story anymore. I think it's something bigger." Elwood invited her in with a nod. Over black coffee and a table cluttered with unpaid bills and old feed catalogs, he told her everything. Dovey's illness, the sale of the bull, the whistle. "I lost a lot this year," he said quietly. "But when Rust laid down at my feet, I felt like maybe I hadn't lost everything." That same afternoon, Deputy Zeke Crowley arrived with a serious look and soft steps. He didn't need to say anything. Elwood had already read the letter. "I hate doing this," Zeke said, handing him a copy of the court summons. "Hate it more than I can explain." Elwood looked down at the paper, then back at Zeke. "It's not your fault. I broke the rules. I knew what I was doing when I opened that gate." But just as Zeke turned to leave, they heard tires crunching gravel. A car pulled up, unfamiliar, polished. From the driver's side stepped Raina Lou Haller, holding a manila folder and her sketch pad, her chin lifted with purpose. "Mr. Granger," she said, stepping toward the porch. "I think I might be able to help." Elwood looked at her. This young girl, barely 12, standing between him and the weight of a world that didn't understand. And for the first time in days, something in his chest flickered. Not hope exactly, but the memory of it. Rena. Lou Haller placed the manila folder carefully on Elwood's kitchen table, her sketch pad resting on top. The old man stared at her, puzzled but attentive. Zeke stood nearby, arms crossed, watching it all unfold like a scene he never expected to be part of. Raina opened the folder and pulled out a printout of Rust's original purchase document. Not the one from the auction, but the first one, from years ago. "I found it in your wife's old ledger," she said softly. It was tucked between recipes and seed orders. She must have kept everything. Elwood reached out with calloused hands and took the paper like it was something sacred. His eyes scanned the faded ink. There it was, his signature, Dovey's initials, and the date. Rust became theirs. Raina leaned forward. "You never transferred his name to the ranch registry after Dovey passed, which means technically ... He was never part of the estate sale, never fully filed as for sale with the county." Zeke leaned over her shoulder, squinting. "That's a hell of a loophole." Noah Kincaid, who'd returned that morning after hearing about the legal notice, was now frantically scribbling notes. "If that's true," she said, "and there's no final bill of sale until the auction, then Merritt may not own him legally. Not if Rust was never part of your listed assets." Elwood sat back, stunned. "You're telling me the reason I might still have a case is because I never finished my paperwork?" Raina smiled, her eyes shining with pride. Sometimes forgetting to file something is the only thing that saves you. The room fell into a strange kind of silence, not peaceful, but charged. Zeke paced slowly, considering his options. Merritt's got money and lawyers. He'll still push it. But this gives you leverage, something to stand on besides memory and emotion. He paused, looking at Elwood. You'd still have to fight for it in court. You sure you're up for that kind of storm? Elwood nodded, quiet but firm. I'm too old to fight the wind, Zeke, but I'll stand my ground if it means that. Bull dies on my land, not in some feedlot. Out in the pasture, Russ grazed peacefully, tail flicking at flies, unaware of the paperwork, the threats, the loopholes. To him, he was already home. And in a way, that truth mattered more than anything a courtroom could ever decide. Elwood stood and walked to the door. We better call someone who knows how to make this official. He looked back at Raina and added, You just gave me the first real chance I've had in a long time. And with that, the old man turned toward the barn, like a man finally walking toward something again, instead of away from it. The courtroom was small, the kind with wood-paneled walls and a faint smell of old paper and floor wax. Elwood Granger sat at the front table, wearing his best shirt, one Dovey had ironed for church years ago. Beside him sat a local attorney named Thatcher Rowe, a quiet man with silver hair and a worn briefcase. Across the aisle sat Duke Malvern, sharp-suited and smirking, representing Cash Merritt, who was seated like a king behind him. The judge entered. Everyone stood. It had begun. Thatcher opened calmly, showing the original registration papers Raina had found. Your Honor, the bull in question, Rust, was never formally listed as an asset in any official estate filings following Mrs. Granger's death. The paperwork shows he remained under private ownership and was not included in the ranch liquidation. Therefore, his sale at auction was not only premature, it was legally void. Duke rose immediately, objecting. That's irrelevant. The auction contract was binding. The judge, Varalyn Tolliver, tapped her gavel lightly. We'll let the facts speak first, Mr. Malvern. When it came time to testify, Elwood took the stand slowly, gripping the wooden rail like it might give way. He wasn't a man of many words, but what he said landed heavy. Rust was born in my barn, he began, fed from my hand. He came to my voice, to my whistle. I raised him like a son after my own boy stopped coming around. His voice cracked, slightly, but he didn't look away. The day he laid down at my feet, he remembered. I reckon ... so did I. Duke countered with cold efficiency. Mr. Granger, are you suggesting that a bull has the legal right to decide where he lives? Elwood looked straight at him. I'm saying that if the law can't tell the difference between ownership and kinship, maybe the law ain't looking close enough. Murmurs rippled through the gallery. Raina Lou sat on the bench, clutching her sketchpad, her feet barely touching the floor. Zeke Crowley sat beside her, hat in hand, his expression unreadable. When the judge called for closing statements, Thatcher kept it short. We're not here just to settle property. We're here to ask who has the right to claim loyalty and what it means when an animal, with no voice of his own, makes his choice anyway. The room held its breath. Rust wasn't there, but in everyone's mind, they saw him, lowering himself at Elwood's feet that day. Judge Tolliver looked down at her bench, fingers steepled. This court will issue its ruling in the morning, she said. Until then, the bull stays where he is. The gavel dropped, and outside thunder rolled again. Asterisk, asterisk. The morning sky was low and gray, as if the clouds themselves were holding their breath. Elwood stood on the porch, cup of coffee in one hand, the court building visible in the distance through the early mist. He hadn't slept much. The thought of losing Rust again, this time with the law behind it, felt like waiting. To be buried twice. The old bull was out in the pasture, still, steady, grazing like he had no idea a judge might decide his fate in the next hour. At the courthouse, the gallery filled quickly. Locals who had once just watched from a distance now came to support, drawn by something they couldn't quite explain. Raina Lou was there with her sketchpad clutched to her chest. Zeke sat beside her, quiet, as if the weight of his badge felt different today. Even Dovie Carlin, who rarely left her house anymore, found a seat near the back. And when Judge Vera Lynn Tolliver entered, the room went silent. "The court," she began, "has reviewed the documentation, the testimony, and the legal precedents involved." Her voice was firm, but not unkind. She paused, looking directly at Elwood. In matters of property, emotion often clouds judgment, but in this case, it has clarified it. The failure to transfer ownership and the absence of a full estate listing nullifies the auction sale of the bull in question. A hush spread through the room like wildfire. Cash Merritt stood abruptly. "This is a damn circus. That animal was mine." "Sit down, Mr. Merritt," Judge Tolliver snapped. "This court is not in the business of assigning ownership to animals who clearly don't accept it." She turned her attention back to Elwood. "Mr. Granger, Rust is legally yours. The court recognizes the original ownership as valid and uninterrupted." Raina gasped. Zeke exhaled slowly. Elwood didn't move, not at first thought. Then he stood, quietly, respectfully, like a man receiving something sacred. Not just a verdict, but the return of something he thought the world had forgotten how to value. "Thank you, Your Honor," he said, voice steady. "He won't be moved again." The judge gave a single nod. "See that he isn't." Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered, microphones out, cameras rolling. Elwood ignored them all. Raina caught up to him on the steps and slipped her sketchpad into his hand. "I made this for you," she said. It was a drawing of Rust and Elwood, walking side by side into a wide field under open sky. He traced the lines with one finger, eyes soft. You see him better than most adults ever could. But just as they stepped into the sunlight, Elwood saw something that made him freeze. A familiar black truck parked across the street. The driver's door opened, and out stepped someone he hadn't seen in over 15 years. His son. The moment froze like an old photograph, dusty, faded, and full of everything unsaid. Elwood Granger stood on the courthouse steps, sketchpad in hand, watching as his son, Cash Merritt Jr., stepped out of the black truck, taller than he remembered, broader in the shoulders, but with the same hesitant walk. Not the same Cash who just tried to take Rust. This was someone else. Someone Elwood hadn't spoken to in 15 years, since the day after Dovie's funeral. Grief had separated them. Pride had kept them apart. Cash Jr. walked slowly, hands at his sides. "I saw the story," he said, his voice hoarse. "Didn't expect to see your name. Or the bull." Elwood didn't answer right away. He was still measuring whether this moment was real or just another passing storm. But Raina Lou's drawing felt warm in his hand, and something inside him loosened. "He came back," Elwood said, quietly, like he never forgot. They sat later that afternoon under the old oak tree behind the house, Rust grazing a few feet away. Cash Jr. looked around the land he'd left behind. "I should have come back sooner. After Mom died, I didn't know what to do with all that silence." Elwood nodded slowly. "Me neither. So I stayed here and tried to fill it with fences and cattle." He paused. "You ever think about coming back for good?" Cash looked out at the pasture, his eyes softening. "Yeah, lately, I do." Zeke Crowley stopped by just before sunset, leaning on his cruiser with a smile that didn't quite hide his surprise. "Didn't think I'd see the two of you in the same frame again," he said. Elwood just gave a tired grin. "Neither did I." Zeke looked toward Rust. "Well, I think the whole damn town learned something from that bull. Maybe loyalty can outlive contracts after all." Before leaving, he tipped his hat to Rena Lou, who was sitting on the porch, sketching again, this time with a smile. That night, Elwood stood at the barn doorway, watching as Cash Jr. laid out fresh hay for Rust. The two moved in rhythm, like old memories finding new patterns. The air smelled of sear and dusk, and for the first time in a long while, the house behind him didn't feel empty. There were voices again, laughter, footsteps on wood. Elwood turned to the stars above and whispered, "He came back, Dove. And so did our boy." And just like that, the silence wasn't so heavy anymore, because what you love, truly love, has a way of coming home, even if it takes a lifetime.